Hi, my name is Nikki. I am the daughter of a murdered woman, and this is part 4. So, after my mother's murder, I will see my little sister at my mom's funeral days later, and then her father will get custody of her, and my dad will get custody of me, and we'll be separated. I will be allowed to see her 6 months later for Christmas, the first Christmas without mom. That's Christmas 93. And then I will not see my little sister again until summer of 94. And this is when my Aunt Wendy goes out of her way to plan a big trip to Disneyland. This is the trip to Disneyland that we were supposed to take the year before, but my mom was murdered. This is that Disneyland trip that she was so upset that she was getting some of her money taken by Russell. So for my mom's memory, my aunt, she took myself, my little sister, and my cousin Lance to Disneyland. If you look back, I've got some of the pictures. You just see that, like, I'm not smiling. I'm not happy. You could tell that I'm just, like, I've checked out. And that's for multiple reasons. It's been a year since my mother was murdered. I'm adjusting to life without her. Life sucks. And because something else big happened in the magical kingdom. Okay, so you remember the night of my mother's murder, the cops will pull me out of the house and they'll put me in a cop car, and my little sister, her first thing she says to me is, "Poppy killed mommy, Poppy killed mommy, Poppy killed mommy," right? You all remember this? So a year later, I'm finally alone with my sister, and I remember asking her about it, like probing a little bit, because she hasn't mentioned it. She's a little chitterbox. And it was just me and her in a bedroom, and she doesn't tell me what she told me last year, that Poppy killed mommy. Instead, she tells me that our mother, mommy, killed herself. I was floored. This is the first time I'd ever heard of this suicide notion. Now, being 10, like, I'm telling you this right now as the perspective of a 10-year-old. We will get into more detail about what happened, how, all of that later. But I'm telling you this as I remember it, because this is, my story. I was old enough to know that my mom was murdered by Russell. I knew that at 10 years old. My family made it, they didn't really talk to me about it, but they made it plain, I asked questions. And they told me it wasn't an accident. And they never even said that S word. So when my little sister said that mommy killed herself, I was fucking floored. That was like the first time I realized what was going on at his house, her house, for the last year. He had been brainwashing her. And on that note, I gotta tell you something that I forgot to tell you in the movie before this. Because the days after my mother's murder are so crazy and they're so foggy for me, for a lot of years I actually repressed this memory. The day after they tell me of my mother's murder, by they I mean Russell Bennett Peterson, the man that will take her life is the one that will tell me that she is no longer here. And before my dad gains custody of me, I don't know whose decision it was, some authoritative body that decided to release me and my little sister. Was his daughter, so I get it, but I was never adopted by this man. This was not my daddy. The fact that they released me into Russell Bennett Peterson's custody for an afternoon is mind-blowing, but they did. They will. This is while we're in foster care. This is days after my mother's murder. This is before the funeral. They will release me to his care for the afternoon, and what will he do? He will take myself and my little sister on a pink Jeep trail tour ride in Sedona. What is that? For anybody that doesn't know about Sedona, it's beautiful. It's red rocks. Something in the iron in the rocks iodizes it, whatever, makes it red. It's very beautiful there. Gotta have money to live there. But something that Russell never did with us in the 2 years that when we lived there was ever do anything with us, A, or B, do like tourist shit. That was for the tourists, and we were residents, just didn't do that shit. He will take us on one of those pink Jeeps, and we will sit in the back, and I'll remember this. And he will do his best to convince me to tell the authoritative bodies, by like the court system I'm talking about, that I want to live with him. He was doing his best to convince me, I want to keep the family together. I love you. Don't you want to stay with your sister? Don't you? I remember it was the sister, is using the sister as like the pawn to like get me to say, yes, 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 of course I do. I'm a little bit on the spectrum. I'm very naive, and you can talk me into signing my soul away if you say it's like a good deal. I will do it. Like, okay, it's a good deal. It's on bargain. Yeah, sure, have it. As a little kid, days after my mom's murder, he's like, I don't really know my dad. He's been in my life for the last 6 years as a father figure, and he's telling me all this stuff. I'm just eating it down. So he was trying his best to brainwash me in those couple hours that he had custody of me in July of 1993. So in the summer of 1994, when my little sister tells me now that mommy killed herself, I'm realizing what he's doing. He's brainwashing her, and he has succeeded in doing so. Because now when she's alone with me, her family, she doesn't repeat what she said the night of the murder. She's saying that mommy killed herself, which is just inaccurate in every form of this. Because my mother's death was ruled homicide by the Maricopa County Medical Examiner's Office. And ruled homicide so much so because the medical examiner will rule her hands were up in defense because he'll find gunpowder residue present on her left hand. That means her hands were up in defense, brah. But the perpetrator will spin that suicide narrative to get out of jail. And he'll start brainwashing his own child to think these thoughts. So that's when I tell my family of what my little sister just told me. And I'll alert, my Aunt Wendy and my grandma, and they'll confront him. And that is when we don't see my little sister. There is no more physical contact with her for about a decade. I miss her watching her grow. I don't really know her because I missed growing with her in those crucial years. I won't have contact with her for, like I said, about 10 years. I'll be in my early 20s. She'll be about 14. She will run away from her father, and she will run to her stepmom. Because, guys, if we're fast forwarding through all this, let's just fast forward through a decade. A decade later, he was never charged, arrested, nothing. He got away with it. So, a year after my mom's murder, he'll meet a new girlfriend. He'll marry her. They'll have a baby. This woman becomes my little sister's stepmom. But then within a year of their marriage, she will immediately divorce him and move on. But still stay in my little sister's life. Because, now they got connected with the kid, and that's Christina's half-brother. Whatever. So at 14, when she's old enough to figure shit out and to run away from him, who she run to? Her stepmom in Phoenix. She runs down here, because I think he was living up in Cottonwood with her at the time. And this stepmom, Diane, totally allows Christina to call her family and to start building relationships again. Dude, so this is the first time I'm out on my own. I'm in my early 20s. I got my first car. I'm out working. I think I was working at Chili's at the time. And the craziest thing happened, because I didn't have a cell phone yet. My dad calls the house phone that I was living at. My roommates take a message, call your dad. So I call my dad, and my dad's like, Nikki, your grandma just called here. Your little sister's looking for you. And I was like, I hadn't heard from the girl in 10 years. In my mind, she's still a little girl. And I was freaked out, and I couldn't wait to call my little sister. And I did. And I rekindled with her. I drove down there. And when I pulled up, she was standing outside, and she's a blonde-haired little girl, and her blonde hair was gone. She had dyed it jet black, and she was all gothy. Could you imagine what she'd been through? But she was so excited to see me, and for a while there, for a few weeks, for a few months, in my early 20s, in her teens, we were able to reconnect for a while and become sisters, and it was a beautiful thing, and that woman, Diane, really allowed that to happen, and for that, I thank her. And that is the end of part 4. We're going to move on with part 5 with my bonding with my sister and bonding with Diane, Russell Peterson's ex-wife.